And yeah, by way of a short kind of introduction and recap to this evening, so we've had this series of talks on light in the dark. We've been exploring how Buddhism erupted into the world with the experience, the awakening of the Buddha, his vision, and how that vision was beyond words, but the Buddha communicated it to other human beings. That light of the Buddha's wisdom, his vision, was brought into the world and passed. It lit up other people. It's passed from person to person. And you could say there's two aspects to that awakening experience. There's the vision, the wisdom, and there's the compassion. That wisdom applied, put into action. And they're not separate. They're both the same thing. They're both what the Buddha experienced. They're both what enlightenment is. It's wisdom and compassion. And so this evening we'll be exploring more. We've been looking at the Buddha's wisdom, the Buddha's vision, through concepts, what he communicated. This evening we're moving more onto the Buddha's compassion, how that was lived out through his disciples. So we'll be hearing in a little while talks from Jenny Thompson and Shubhasingha, telling us stories about some of the Buddha's disciples and how they practiced compassion, how they lived, how they expressed the Buddha's wisdom, how his vision. So we'll be looking at the practical aspect of that, the altruistic aspect of that. So there's this dual aspect to enlightenment, wisdom and compassion. There's also a dual aspect to this evening, because another thing that's going on this evening, a big thing that's going on this evening, is it's Maitrivasin's last Sangha Night with us. He leaves the UK next Tuesday, and a lot of us are going to be very sad about that. And we're going to, the first part of this evening is to just really mark that by rejoicing in Maitrivasin and his qualities. And lots and lots and lots of people have sent in rejoicings about Maitrivasin, and too many to include, really. And I've been given the task of rejoicing on behalf of all of the Sangha. So I'll be drawing on lots of different things that different people have said and kind of pulling out some themes, key themes. Hopefully most of you will know who Maitrivasin is. If you don't, you'll know him in a few minutes' time. And it's like the best thing you could say about Maitrivasin is just to look around the room. Like, we're all here. Most of us are here because of Maitrivasin in one way or another. Some people specifically because of this evening. So like, there's people I've not seen for ages. Stephen, it's great to see Stephen and Robert and Kev at the back, and Dan and Garva saw come in. There's just loads of people who are here because of Maitrivasin, and that in a way says everything. So the first quality, that was loads and loads of people. In a way, loads and loads of people said loads of things, but a lot of people said, I've got the wrong page, excuse me. Lots of people talked about Maitrivasin's welcoming presence. So that he's often the first person people will meet at the Buddhist Centre, because partly because of his role, but partly because of who he is. He's just always at intro courses, always around the centre, loves to open the door to people, loves to greet them, does that with a smile on his face, and just unfailingly kind of welcoming, kind, friendly, caring. And that has made a massive difference to so many people. And people have said specifically a lot of times in the rejoicings, I only kept on coming because Maitrivasin made me feel welcome, or Maitrivasin helped me to feel safe at the Buddhist Centre and welcome at the Buddhist Centre. Valley said, you open the doors of the Dharma with your welcome at the Buddhist Centre. B. Jenkins said, you're so warm and friendly, kind and generous, and you make everyone feel welcome and they belong. Chloe said, from the moment I walked into the Buddhist Centre on the intro course, you've made me feel so welcome and safe. So lots of people said similar things like that. Maitrivasin is a welcoming presence, very friendly, and just makes people feel welcome. It's probably now going to respond to John who's coughing. That's kind of the Maitrivasin. Just the kind of friendly, welcoming, looking out for people. And an aspect of that is Maitrivasin's love. Maitrivasin really exemplifies love, loving kindness. Well, his name means perfumed with loving kindness, and Maitrivasin is so appropriately named by Mogavangsa's preceptor. He is an embodiment of metta. That's what Dialoka and Leela Matti said in their rejoicings. Maitrivasin, you're an embodiment of metta. People have said you have a wonderful heart, kind eyes, and you're patient, you put them at ease. So for me, this is Maitrivasin sets the bar very, very high with his practice and embodiment of loving kindness. We all try and cultivate metta through the metta bhavana, but it just seems to come so naturally to Maitrivasin. He just exudes love for people and care for people. And for me, that we talk about the ideal Buddhist, the Bodhisattva, who just loves all beings and then responds to in whatever way is needed. And this is another aspect of Maitrivasin. It's just practical help. He'll do whatever is needed, either at the centre or if he's got a friend who needs something. He doesn't mind what they need or what the task is. He'll respond very, very practically and just do what is needed. So Lili Matti said, "Your presence, warmth, sense of fun and wonderful hugs make me and others feel welcome, valued, loved at the Buddhist Centre. And thank you for all your tireless practical work to keep the centre running smoothly and looking beautiful." So there's loads of things Maitrivasin does. You just don't see, they're invisible almost. And that's an embodiment of generosity. He's not doing it to get thanks or to be seen or to be noticed. He's doing it out of love. Love of the Sangha, love of the Three Jewels, love of us. Just loads and loads of things, just very practical things that people wouldn't really notice. And we'll notice next week when he's not here and we're not doing them. All the things Maitrivasin just did without us realising. So that tireless practical work, you do what's needed and just get on with it with no fuss, with love really, with joy, lila. And then a lot of people also rejoice in Maitrivasin's fun, his humour, his playfulness, gentle humour, a cheeky smile. And Lu Hewson said, "Maitrivasin, your kindness is palpable. You're a beautiful mix of love, playfulness and caring. What a joy to find someone you can have a really good giggle with." So people really love and appreciate Maitrivasin, your playfulness and your gentle humour and your fun. But then, yes, there's a big part of Maitrivasin is Maitri and love, but people also really notice Maitrivasin's wisdom. This is Maitri as an expression of wisdom. And part of that is, real true metta involves seeing. It involves seeing the lack of distinction between self and other, that there's no separation, that we are interdependent, co-produced, which we've been talking about in the last few weeks. So there's a wisdom behind Maitrivasin's love. And Ellie says that she's in awe of your wisdom. People have talked about your reassuring, helpful advice. Ellie said this, so thank you for taking the time to actively listen to me, give the time to allow me to open up, to really see and guide me on what's my path towards enlightenment. So a lot of people have said how you're just able to drop in words of wisdom, just a few words of wisdom that help them. Viviananda says, "I think wisdom is a source of your love, a true and practical wisdom that you express most through your relationships with the people in your life. I've learned from the way you listen to wise people with reverence and respect, paying gratitude where it's due, especially to your spiritual friends and teachers." And Satyajoti said that she loves that you frame things in the Dharma, and that when you're talking to her and giving her advice, you bring it back to the Dharma, and she really respects your Dharma practice. And Rachel Bellin says the Dharma twinkles in your eye, which is a nice way to put it. And a couple of people gave really great images. Cocker said, "You're like a great tree of the Sheffield Sangha, providing stability with your roots, and through your canopy of branches, comfort and shelter for people." So a great tree of the Sheffield Sangha. And Preti and Izzy described you as a jewel, a true Sangha jewel and a jewel of a man. So you're both a tree and a jewel. And one thing that we'll all miss is your hugs, Maitrivasin's hugs. So many people rejoiced in the hugs that Maitrivasin gives. So Ellie said, "The best bear hugs." Tina says, "Your warmth and hugs." And Lou said, "Big heart, big hugs." Julie said, "Amazing hugs." Paul Beasley, Your warm humanity and that lovely smile and those wraparound hugs that helped me settle into the community. So the hugs is maybe the one thing that kind of captures Maitrivasin. And so I want to just, I'll end in a minute, but I want to read a poem that Justin from our Mitra group wrote and recited last night for us, called Farewell Hug, because we had a farewell to Maitrivasin in our Mitra group last night. So this is by Justin Sheppy for Maitrivasin. See, I love a good hug me. They're important and they're free. A good one helps me to really trust someone. A great one means they're open and warm and often lots of fun. He's got one of those hugs you could lose yourself in, that wears you like a sweater. One of those hugs that makes you feel loads better, full of mindfulness as well as heartfelt metta. One of those hugs that follows love to the letter, that leads to joy and the breaking of fetters. Perfumed with loving kindness, his hugs have got so much heart in. Those hugs are all Maitrivasin. So we're going to miss Maitrivasin, and he's going to leave a big hole in our community, in our Sangha, but also a challenge and an invitation, because we have to fill that hole. We have to be a bit more like Maitrivasin. We have to be, we all need to be a bit more welcoming to newcomers and to each other, a bit more warmer, have more time for each other, and hug a bit more. That's the challenge, that's the invitation that Maitrivasin leaves us with. And so now Pranya Hridaya, on behalf of the Sangha, is going to come up and present Maitrivasin with some things on behalf of the Sangha. So we need Pranya Hridaya and Maitrivasin to come up. So, because you're not mic'd up, Pranya Hridaya, maybe I'll explain what they are. So the many, many rejoicings that we received have been very lovingly put into a book for Maitrivasin. So Maitrivasin can take the book with photos and rejoicings and remember us and look at it when he's in Turkey and remember how much we love him, if you're ever feeling like he needs that. And then there's also been a very generous collection for Maitrivasin, which will help him, hopefully, as he settles in his new life in Turkey. £1,000 and £35, the Bank of the Buddha. Wow. The Bank of the Buddha.
Wow. Yeah, it's hard to take you all in, and I don't think I am fully, but I'm taking a fair bit of I'm receiving a lot of metta. I can really feel that. It's beautiful. And I'm trying to think, like, I came to Sheffield Buddhist Centre about 11 years ago, and in a way, there is a bit of vagueness in that because, I was a lot vaguer in those days. And people who know me will know more specifically what I mean. A lot of things have changed. A lot of things have changed since then. I just remember doing the intro course and sat right at the back, the furthest back I could sit. And for a long time, that's where I spent my time. And with things, with time, things changed. And it's quite a transformation, really, finding myself here. And in a way, I was thinking, what can I say? What can I communicate about that, about my journey, about my 10, 11 years at Sheffield Buddhist Centre and the community here as well, living in the men's community. And in a way, I think what I've come up with is like there's a real sense of like a lineage. So I get a real sense of lineage in Sheffield Buddhist Centre, and that's those are the conditions I found myself in here. And that's one of the things that really drew me in. And it's also really helped me grow. And this is a lineage, particularly like a few weeks ago, we had a talk, I think, with Pranya Hridaya, when he was talking about the Buddha and his enlightenment. And afterwards, like, it doesn't end there. Like, things don't end there. There's this side to the enlightened mind, this journey that we're on, that's all altruistic. He wants to go out. And in that attitude, I find, like, Well, one way of communicating it is like it's a change from what's in it for me, what do I get out of it, do I like it, to what can I give? So what can I give? What can I offer? How can I help? And in a way, like, yeah, the Buddha going forward and teaching and spreading the Dharma, it's like a really representation of that beautiful ideal, that beautiful attitude of an enlightened mind. And in levels, like I was thinking, so Sangha, so I think he must have been in his early 20s. So our teacher, our founder, he was in Kalimpong. So in his early 20s, this is the late 1940s, early 50s, and he's following his teacher around India. And he gets told to stay in this little town up in the mountains and serve the Dharma. And that's it. That's the instruction he gets. And that's what he does. That's what he does. It's not about, I don't want to stay here in this strange place that he's never been to. And it's like, yeah, there's a little sense of like real connection for me in there, to like real lineage to the Buddha, that whole sense of giving. What can I give? How can I serve? And to me, Sangha really demonstrates that in that example in his life. And I would really recommend reading his memoirs to really find out about this altruistic approach to life that he brings. And in many ways, that's kind of carried through. That's carried through in the early days of the order. And if you read and learn more about it, or you talk to people about it, it's just like a beautiful sense of service. So there's a beautiful sense of service. And this is one of the things I really got a sense when I came here. Like there is a living connection almost, like all the way to the Buddha, of people serving what's better and what's bigger and what's helpful and beneficial to people and for beings to grow, and as well as themselves growing. And I was thinking like, more and more, like there'll be plenty of people who've heard of people like Sioux City, but like I'm sure some of you have never heard of Sioux City. And I really encourage you to find out about Sioux City and what he did and what he gave to this place, and how much we benefited from the service and the generosity of people like him. And I was just more thinking, like who else have I benefited from? And basically everybody, like, well, there'll be loads of other people that were here in the beginnings of Sheffield, not just the order. And I was thinking, like everywhere I go, everywhere I talk to, there's a like part of my wisdom or what I've developed, this comes through Vedanya's vision. So I've like imbued a bit of Vedanya's vision and his Dharma economy. Like that's something so beneficial to all of us. It's just absolutely amazing that I couldn't have come here if it wasn't for the Dharma economy. And like the first chair when I came was Suryamati, and she was just a delight to volunteer and work for. And it was just beautiful. Like these people, they were just serving. There wasn't anything in it for them in any way, a status or anything. They were just serving, and it was beautiful to serve with them. And then I met people like Amoghavampsa. It's just like, if you've never really seen him or met him, or just asked people about Amoghavampsa as well. It's just such a beautiful, beautiful man. And I was thinking like people like Achara and like who had such a big part to play in us having this amazing building. And then I was thinking, like the right livelihoods around Sheffield. So Dayavajra, someone like Dayavajra has played such a big part in there being so many right livelihoods. And I think Vimala Mata's here, she's had some part to play in that. And it's like, if you don't know these people, like I really encourage you to get to know about the history of Sheffield Buddhist Centre and what people have given to it. Because that really, like, it just really goes to my heart in a way, and it creates this sense of gratitude. The more I'm in touch with what I've received, the more gratitude arises, and then you just want to serve from abundance when that happens. I'm seeing like Stephen Rogers is like, most people won't even know Stephen, but there's loads of things he's repaired and built around in Sheffield Buddhist Centre, in the gardens, in the community downstairs. Like Stephen's played a massive part in giving so much to the centre. And then it's like, I'm coming like closer to the last few years. And I remember Bodhinaga and Maitrivasin getting ordained in Spain and coming back, and straight away they started leading our Mitra group. And loads of us are order members now, and Dhyasingha's here as well. And it's just like this beautiful sense of people finding something beautiful, benefiting from it, growing, and then joining the whole spreading of it, And then like the current teams around here, so Maitrivasin has played a massive part in building more teams so the centre could grow. So more and more things can get done, and more people can benefit from the centre and what is going on. And currently our current chair, Satyajyoti, is going to like manage such a big centre, and it's just amazing how much goes on behind the scenes, and how much is being like organised from all the different teams, and how much the centre team are doing, and all the different people that are involved with the centre. It's just, there's something beautiful about when we recognise this. We just want to serve. And I really encourage you all to sort of find out more about Sheffield Buddhist Centre and its past, and how it's come to where it is, and what you're getting from it, and how you can encourage, how you can feel that abundance to kind of want to spread it more, give more. So I'd like to recommend that you talk to people who've been around for longer and ask them about the past and the people who've been here. And when you get that impulse to want to give, serve, be part of it, just do it. And I've really enjoyed my last 10, 11 years of living here, working here, pretty much being here, part of the furniture as it's felt. And and in a way, might bring up the question of, why am I leaving then? That is a very good question, but I haven't got time. Yes, well, a lovely lady is part of it, yes. A very big part of it. But part of me feels very strongly of going home, where I grew up in Turkey. And I'll leave that bit more mysterious and like that for now. But thank you, everybody who's been part of my life for the last 10 years or so. I've just benefited hugely, and it's delightful to hear and see that I've also benefited people. And I'm just ever so grateful for everyone here and everyone who's preceded all the way back to the Buddha. Thank you, everybody. I won't forget these.
I'm not Sangha Night.
There you go. Thank you.
Thank you, Maitrivasin. So a very powerful example of somebody getting a vision and then acting on it, and wanting to share that with other people. That vision and that impulse to act on it and live a different life, to live differently, to benefit people. So Maitrivasin, really powerful exhortation of that, really, an example of that, embodiment of that. And we're going to move on to two short talks from Jenny and then from Shubhasingha. We'll be just drawing out how that happened at the time of the Buddha, how two examples of the Buddha's disciples who've got this vision from the Buddha and they're living that out and putting that into practice. And there might be nods to Maitrivasin in there as well, and how he does that. So I won't introduce you in between, but there'll be first Jenny and then Shubhasingha. Sangha Gita is going to time for us and just wave to you when it's 8 minutes, and then again at 10 minutes. Okay, so first of all, Jenny.
Oh, lovely to see everyone. So I'm going to talk about Ananda, who is one of the Buddha's closest and dearest friends. And I think as I go on, you may see the connections with Maitrivasin. I'm not going to make many of them directly, so I'll leave that to you. But the only thing is, I must apologise, I couldn't corroborate whether Ananda was a good hugger. So for tonight, we're just going to assume he was a very good hugger. So he was actually, Ananda was one of the Buddha's cousins. So he was a family member. And also he was an aristocrat. So he, like the Buddha, kind of went forth from a life of privilege. And so, so the Buddha had gone forth. And so a while later, Ananda thought, this what's going on here? So he went and followed too, to see what was happening. And what was amazing was that the Buddha didn't really need to speak when they met again at this point. It was just the Buddha's presence. And Ananda just saw the Dharma, saw the reality, and immediately attained quite a strong level of wisdom. Not quite enlightenment at that point, but just being in the presence of the Buddha, he was like, this is it. So he joined the Buddha's followers, and so for about 20 years he was kind of part of the posse, and studied, meditated. So he was about the same age as the Buddha. So when the Buddha was about 55, he got his kind of closest disciples, and he said, "Look, I'm getting a bit older. I've had some attendants that have helped me in the past, with kind of message taking and just kind of helping me move from place to place. But they haven't all been that amazing, to be honest. So I'm getting older. I need someone really trustworthy." So all the disciples were like, and but Ananda, really modest guy, steps back. He thought, the Buddha will know who the right choice is. And the Buddha did know the right choice. And he said, "Ananda is the pleasing one to me, not these others." And so Ananda became, attendant doesn't really give us a true sense of what he was. So for the next 20 years, he slept by the side of the Buddha. He gave him foot massages. He was the main kind of message communicator with people that were visiting. But he was incredibly humble, because he said to the Buddha, "I'll only do this if you ensure that, if you're given food offerings or robes, please do not give them to me. If you get special treatment, I do not want it. All I want is that if you ever teach and I'm not around, tell me that teaching when you come back, so I don't miss anything." Also, I think he did empty the dishwasher a lot. But also, so he served with gratitude, but he was also wise. So yeah, he was an attendant, but he was wise counsel. And there's a really notable moment where the Buddha, his mum died when he was really quite young, and so his aunt brought him up, suckled him, was a very important figure in his life. And she heard about what had been happening to the Buddha and wanted to go forth. So she went to one of the gatherings, and with the Buddha, you usually had to ask 3 times for things. So she said to the Buddha, "Can I go forth? Can I follow you?" And he said, "You're a woman, no." So she asked again, "You're a woman, no." Asked again, "Woman, no." But she wouldn't really take no for an answer. So she shaved her head, put some robes on, and just kind of followed from a distance where the Buddha went. And Ananda saw all of this, and he saw that her name was Prajapati. He saw that actually her and her women followers, their feet were getting sore. They were crying. They wanted this so much, and they couldn't have it. And his heart broke. So he thought, right, I'm going to intercede here. So he went to the Buddha, and then he asked 3 times, "Can these women join? No. Can these women join? No. Can these women join? No." So then he said to the Buddha, and I need to quote this directly. He said, "Buddha, just suppose women were to go forth from home into the homeless life under the Dharma Vinaya set forth by the Tathagata," that's the Buddha. "Would they be capable of attaining the fruits of stream entry, or once returning, or non-returning, or the fruits of arhantship?" These are kind of levels of insight and knowledge. And the Buddha admitted, well, yes, they could do that. And so Ananda said, "Well, your aunt, she's brought you up. Do you not want to help her gain these seeds of liberation?" And the Buddha was like, "Well, yes, I do." And so this was due to Ananda's compassion towards Prajapati. and also just kind of having the Buddha's trust and knowing the right way to communicate. This was women's kind of way into going forth, which is quite a big thing. And you know, he was a friend to all, but it meant that as the Buddha got older, so the Buddha got to about 80, and Ananda was really distressed, and he just said to the Buddha, "But I still have so much to learn, and you're not going to be here very soon." And I think we can kind of switch things here now and actually think of ourselves when someone dear and wise is going away. And the Buddha said, "For a long time, Ananda, you've been in the Tathagata's presence, showing loving kindness in body, speech, and mind, beneficially, blessedly, wholeheartedly, and unstintedly. You have achieved much merit, Ananda. Make the effort, and in a short time, you will be free of corruptions." So he's saying that the time that you spend in a wise and positive presence isn't lost. It can't be lost. It bears its own fruit, its own positive consequences. And so those that have known that wise person can progress themselves in the spiritual life. And so the Buddha died, and Ananda really took this on board. He studied more, he meditated more, and by this effort, he did become enlightened. And at the same time, some of the other disciples at this point were thinking, how can we gather the Buddha's teachings so that we can pass this on? And they really needed Ananda for this, because he'd been with the Buddha like more than anyone. And so what happened was they thought, right, we need Ananda. So the council was about to begin, and no sooner had the monks been seated than Ananda arrived, flying through the air by his psychic power that he had attained, took his seat, and on the basis of his recollections, the first part of the Pali Canon, the Sutta Pitaka, were settled. And so there we have it. So we have Ananda, a steady, a wise friend to many, and very much perfumed with loving kindness.
Okay, so I'm going to share a couple of moments from the Shubhasingha Sutta, which tells the story of when the Buddha met 3 monks who were living in perfect harmony as like an ideal spiritual community. And yet I'm also going to use my experience of living with Maitrivasin in the community the last 4 or 5 years and just draw out his qualities and what we can learn from both the sutta and his example as well, of like how to live best in harmony with others and create community. So yeah, the first moment I'd like to share is from the beginning of the sutta. So the Buddha rises from meditation one night and he begins walking towards the solitary wood in the park of Shubhasingha. And as he approaches the wood, this protective park keeper runs up to him and says, "No, there are 3 monks practicing in this wood who are not to be disturbed, have something really, really special here. Please turn back." Luckily, though, one of the monks, Anuruddha, hears that park keeper and rushes out and reassures him and says, no, like, it's okay. This is our teacher. And they all go out to meet the Buddha. So I'll just read you that bit. All 3 went out to meet the Blessed One. One took his bowl and outer robe, one prepared a seat, and one set out water for the washing of feet. Then those 3 venerable ones paid homage to the Blessed One and sat down at one side. So yeah, I find this really important, that the first thing we hear about this community and the individuals of which it consists is just through their actions. You know, they don't go out and say, do you know, we're like a really harmonious, amazing community? You know, they go and there's immediate exemplification, isn't there, of like reverence, warmth, and putting aside what they were doing and just being hospitable. So, like, that says so much more, doesn't it, than words ever could of what it means to live in harmony. They just go about their jobs without discussion, seamlessly, to make the Buddha relax and feel welcomed and warm. And I think it says a lot about what Sangha is. It's a verb, isn't it? It's something that's created through collective action. And this has been my experience very much of Maitrivasin with him the last 4 or 5 years. He's just a man that acts. He knows intuitively how to welcome people, as we've heard, just help them relax, feel like there's a friend by their side. And he's just like incredibly available for people. It's like he's always around. He's been a part of so many people's welcomes, Sangha Nights, first Sangha Nights, intro courses. And it's like, for me, my experience of Maitrivasin is it's like clock time. The time on our watches doesn't really make sense to him. It's a bit like, you know, for myself and other people, like my day is segmented into bits of time. So I do this thing, and then I've got that thing. And once I've got through all my tasks, I might have time for this person or that person. And if someone unexpectedly pops up, I feel a bit like, oh, they're taking a bit of time away from me, or I feel a bit tight about that. But with Maitrivasin, it's just this abundance of time. That's like this atmosphere around him. You know, someone could just turn up at the Buddhist Centre, upset, needing support, just wanting a chat, and he'll be there for them. He'll be one of the first people there to just spend however long they need. You know, I've been that person sometimes. I've seen that happen. And I also just get the sense when we're having a 10-minute chat in the kitchen, like I just sort of go into the community kitchen, and it's almost like he's not bothered about what's going to come in 10 minutes. It's just me in front of him for that 10 minutes, which is the most important thing. He's not so fussed about the time on his watch and what's next. And the monks, they really seem like that, don't they? You know, the Buddha just turns up unannounced, and they don't sort of say, I've got a scheduled night off in my calendar tonight. Can you come back tomorrow, please? You know, they just put everything to one side. They welcome him. And I think we can learn so much from Maitrivasin and from these monks and their example, because in our world of to-dos and tasks, what the Sangha really needs, what the ideal community really needs, are people that always have time to connect, always have time to welcome, never are too busy for that, never feel too tight with their time. So back to the sutta. Having sat down and been, properly welcomed, the Buddha asked the monks how they're doing. How are you living together? He says, I hope, Anuruddha, that you are all living in concord, with mutual appreciation, without disputing, blending like milk and water, viewing each other with kindly eyes. And Anuruddha then replies, they are indeed doing this. And he says, it is a gain for me. It is a great gain that I'm living with such companions in the holy life. I maintain bodily acts of loving kindness towards those venerable ones, both openly and privately. I maintain verbal acts of loving kindness towards those venerable ones, both openly and privately. I maintain mental acts of loving kindness towards those venerable ones, both openly and privately. So this is the second moment that I wanted to share. And the key teaching here is very explicit, isn't it? It's acts of loving kindness, maintaining loving kindness, is the foundation for living in harmony with others. But because it's so clearly expressed doesn't mean it's easy, or there's not a lot to reflect on here. So I think it's worth asking ourselves, what does this look like practically in our lives? And again, Maitrivasin, a great example of this. Loads of moments spring to mind in our living together. I just constantly saw him maintaining acts of loving kindness. So first, and as has been mentioned loads already, his legendary hugs. I just feel really loved, and I know a lot of you do, when you're lucky enough to get a Maitrivasin hug. And it is more, isn't it, than just that he's a big man with long arms. I mean, that helps. Definitely helps. But he's got an intuitive, tactile nature, doesn't he? And I think he's a master at just knowing when to put a hand on my shoulder, or just knowing when to stand beside me and offer reassurance in that way. And I think it's a real skill to kind of exude safety and reassurance that not many people have, even though it sounds quite simple. Another example that comes to mind is how he would sometimes get up early when we lived in the community and just bake bread for us to wake up to. So sometimes you just wake up and just smell freshly baked bread, going through the corridors. What an atmosphere. I've loved just that smell. It really reminds me of him. I'm going to really miss that smell. And often at lunchtimes too, I just come into the kitchen and he'd be cooking lunch, and he'd cook double just for me, basically. Like, I'd not asked that before. He would just know that I probably want some food and have made it for me without even asking. So, these were things that I noticed that he did. And I'm sure there are loads of things he's done and I've not noticed. And I think that Anna Rudder makes that point of both openly and privately is really worth focusing on, because, people don't always need to know that you're acting lovingly and kindly for them. Actually, washing up the dishes when no one knows creates just the same atmosphere. And we just need to get on with it sometimes without making a fuss, don't we? Care for people in that way too. Thank you. So then turning towards acts of loving kindness that I've seen from Maitrivasin through his speech. So I would often notice on Thursday nights we have community night, and we each go around and say a bit about our week. And often I would just talk about myself and how my week's been. But Maitrivasin pretty much every time would just rejoice in other people, just like take that space to rejoice in other people. And he'd just go around often like one by one, looking at each person and would just say like a positive observation of that person and really encourage them for the week ahead. And I was just noticing tonight as well, like this was his chance to talk about what the centre's given him. And he just decided to rejoice in everyone else. And I just think that's a real quality and atmosphere, again, that he creates of love through his speech. And I'd often have the experience that I'd be on a walk with someone or talking to someone in the Sangha, and they'd say, "Oh, Maitrivasin was singing your praises the other day." And that just meant so much. Like, I might never have known that he was rejoicing me to someone else. But that atmosphere, that sense that like everyone's saying nice things about each other, it really builds community. It really creates an atmosphere, doesn't it? Okay, and then finally, so how I've experienced him maintain mental acts of loving kindness is probably a bit more subtle, a bit more difficult. But I think I get a sense of it through all I've just said, because, from a loving mind, there naturally springs forth loving, acts of loving kindness. So behind all the hugs, behind the loving words, I just often feel his loving mind coming through those things. It comes out in his soft, gentle tone of his voice. That's just really distinct to me, your voice, the sound of your voice. In his spark in his eyes and his cheeky smile as well. And I think there's an important lesson in this, that our minds do have an impact on how we act and how we come across. And that's not to say that if we're in a bad mood, we can't speak kindly or do something nice for someone. We definitely should. But we can tell, can't we, when someone's straining a bit to be generous or straining a bit to compliment us. And with Maitrivasin, my experience, the example he set, I think, is I can just always feel his love perfume in those things. When he says it, he really means it. It's springing forth from that loving mind of his. So if we're regularly practicing metta and bringing friends to mind, they will notice. It will be there below our words and below our actions. So yeah, plenty of examples from Maitrivasin and my living with him of what Anna Rudder was trying to get at. And reflects on this sutta just made me really grateful to have lived with you over the past 4 or 5 years. And, just having you in the heart of the Sangha. And it will be a massive loss. I think Bodhinaga's right. But I do see it as a challenge as well. I hope we can all develop some Maitrivasin-ness between us collectively. And so for me, I think what we can learn from this sutta, what we can learn from Maitrivasin is, let's do our best to have time for people as much as we can. Act and serve wherever we're needed, and just give really great hugs. Yeah. So,